you see up here week after week, sometimes children are best at teaching us about the mystery and the eternal reality of this presence that we call God. To see their faces and to feel their love for being here in this place is a wonderful blessing. When she needed to get away and figure things out, a 10-year-old girl would jump on her bike and she would ride a mile or so to her favorite park and her favorite tree. And lying underneath this tree, she would gaze up through its leaves, up to this brilliant blue sky and glimmering sun. And the expanse of this scene was breathtaking. And lost in wonder in the sounds of everything in creation around her, she would find herself drifting higher and higher up toward the sky. And then it would happen. The world and life around this little girl would somehow give way to an experience or something that was more significant and something more powerful. And as she says, it was a presence unlike any other. A 4-year-old boy, an only child, living in a remote area, making his own fun, his own entertainment, would wander along the creek bed and pick up stones. And then he would kick his feet in the dust, and he would fill his pockets with anything that he could find around him. And he would chat to himself. But the little boy didn't feel alone. He was aware of someone or something accompanying him. And so he chatted on. From the very young to the most senior among us, many will have experienced this God presence, whether we name it as God or not. Whether young or old in this fast-paced world, there is sometimes this need to slow down and to take a deep breath and just notice what is around us. To pause and to bask in this wonder and mystery that we call God. I think evoking the mystery and wonder of God and bringing those questions to the table with a group of children or a group of adults in the fellowship hall after church is one of the most fun things in the week, for me at least. Some of us get lost in this mystery and this wonder, and we don't have to have things explained for us because we just feel the presence of God around us, whether we can exactly describe it or name it. But then other people have this strong drive for certainty. They got to know all the answers to the questions, especially when it comes to religion. The Roman Catholic Church, as for those of you who've grown up in the Catholic faith, know that it says it's the true church. It's the one church. And it claims its authority all the way back to the first Pope, St. Peter. Jehovah's Witness and the Mormon Church will send out members in pairs preaching to anyone who's going to listen to them that they are the true church. Southern Baptists proclaim with certainty to know right doctrine. And Pentecostals proclaim with certainty to know the Holy Spirit. And fundamentalists claim with certainty the role of women and men in the life of the church and in the home. This hunger for certitude. To know the truth is particularly evident when we ponder the questions of life after death. Tell me, Pastor, what happens when I die? I don't know. I don't say that. I'm teasing. We want to know the answers to the ultimate questions of life. Does personal consciousness survive the death of the physical body? I love reading everything I can find on that topic. If so, what awaits us? Can those who have died still communicate with those who are alive? I love reading about that stuff. I've even been to hear John Edward, who was speaking several years ago downtown in the Cornhusker. Can those who have died communicate with one another? Can people who have crossed over help us in our respective journeys in this life? These are questions that people ponder. In today's lesson from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20, verses 27 through 38, we're getting toward the end of Jesus' life. It's toward the end of the church year. So Jesus is in Jerusalem, and he knows the end is near. Okay? And so this part of the Gospel is about ultimate things. And so in this lesson, Jesus is asked a tough question by a group of people within Judaism known as the Sadducees. So in your history of the Bible, between the years of 200 and 100 before Christ, BC, it doesn't mean before Christ, it means before the Common Era, but we know it as AD and BC. So before the year 0, 200 years to 100 years, the Sadducees and the Pharisees disagreed with a concept of resurrection of the body. The Sadducees were a group of people that were most closely aligned with the Jerusalem temple and the priesthood. And many of the Sadducees were wealthy, and they belonged to the upper class. They were conservative in their beliefs, and they didn't believe in resurrection. Sadducees only believed in the Torah, the first 5 books of our Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And resurrection wasn't in those books, and so they didn't believe it. So they come up to Jesus one day and pose a question because they know Jesus is more like the Pharisees and they believe in resurrection. And so this is what they say. Jesus, in this so-called resurrection from the dead, we know that the dead are presumed to be raised after they die. So there's this sad woman who goes through a score of weddings and funerals of 7 husbands. So, when she dies, who's going to be her husband? Sadducees attempted to trick Jesus with this question and the absurdity in their belief of the resurrection. And Jesus responds in a way that says, in effect, your question, Sadducees, assumes that whatever life God has in store for us after this life is merely an extension of this life. But consider, Sadducees, if you will, that the resurrection is about a whole new way of life. It's not an extension of this life. Resurrection is a victory of God over the power of death in this life with a future existence that is incomparable. Well, what does that mean? Simply put, Jesus answers the Sadducees' question by describing how heaven and earth are not the same. That might be disturbing to you. It might be enlightening to you. It might be exciting for you, given that a lot of people on this earth lead really, really crappy lives. And so the less like this life for the afterlife would be good news. Basic thing is that the ways of God transcend the ways of human beings. That God's judgments aren't our judgments. That God's certainty is not our certainty. That things don't work in heaven the way that things work on earth, thank God. We bring our questions. We bring our questions. They are our own. And we too, like the Sadducees, like the Pharisees, wonder what continuity, if any, exists between this life and the life to come. Because when this life is filled with tons of love, we want that life in the life to come. Why wouldn't we? What becomes of all these things that make life so beautiful and so wonderful in this life? Is Jesus saying they're all going to be gone? Well, that's not good news. Are any of these things a part of the resurrected life? What about marriages? What about families? What about relationships? Like the Sadducees, we bring our questions to Jesus too. So maybe we shouldn't poke too much fun at the Sadducees, because we're kind of in the same boat. Jesus does not answer our questions, though one of our illusions is that Jesus should. What does Jesus tell us? What does Jesus show us? He teaches us, and he models for us, and he shows us a God of love. That is all we need to know. Because love was God's first act. Big bang or no big bang, I don't care what you believe. God's first act is love. And it's God's only act. Love is our pulse. Love is God's DNA. Our lifelong movement toward love is what brings meaning and purpose into our lives. So in my mind, people of God, people of faith, people of Bethany Christian Church, I don't think churches need to be so concerned about what is certain, or about what doctrine or creed is right, or how one should practice their faith. I think churches need to be moved to love and should move the world in that direction, because that is God's direction. And I believe the eternal reality of God is present and alive with me and among us in the here and now every single day of our lives. And you ask me how I know that, and my answer to you is going to be love. Love. Let us go into the world and show God's love. We invite you to become a part of a movement that seeks to express love in many, many different ways and forms to the wider community and to the world. I'm so proud of you, Bethany Christian Church, for all the ways that you love.